The Korean Mafia boss who built an empire on one unbreakable rule sits frozen behind his black marble desk, watching a woman in crimson destroy everything he swore to protect, and he can't bring himself to stop her. Welcome back. Before we dive in, do me a favor, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. Let's build this community together. Sung-hoon Ryu's office sat 43 floors above Seoul like a fortress carved from shadows and gold. Black marble walls absorbed the light. Gold trim lined the edges of everything: the desk, the shelves, the frame of the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city he controlled with surgical precision. A single clock ticked steadily on the wall, each second measured, predictable, obedient. Everything about this room screamed one thing: control. And Sung-hoon Ryu was a man who controlled everything. At 36, he ran Seoul's most feared crime syndicate with the ruthless efficiency of a war strategist. Tall, sharp-featured, impeccably dressed in tailored black suits that never wrinkled, he moved through his empire like a blade through silk, silent, precise, and devastatingly effective. His men feared him. His enemies respected him. His allies never questioned him. And everyone knew about the rule. It wasn't written in any handbook. It wasn't announced at meetings or whispered in back rooms. But it was as real and immovable as the marble beneath his feet. No curvy women, ever, under any circumstances. Not in his office. Not in his organization. Not in his presence. The rule had kept Sung-hoon's world sterile, predictable, and safe. His mother, a woman whose soft curves and tender smile had once been his sanctuary, had lured his father into an ambush that destroyed their family. Curves meant softness. Softness meant weakness. Weakness meant betrayal. And Sung-hoon Ryu had spent 15 years making sure betrayal never touched him again. Your 2 p.m. consultant interview is here, sir. Min Jae, his second in command, announced through the intercom. Sung-hoon glanced up from the financial projections on his tablet, his expression unreadable. Credentials: impressive. MBA from Wharton. 8 years in international finance. Fluent in Korean, English, and Mandarin. Previously managed portfolios exceeding $200 million. He nodded, already uninterested in anything beyond the resume. Send her in. The door opened, and the air in the room shifted. She didn't walk in. She arrived. Tiffany Sinclair stood in the doorway like a disruption of fate itself. Tall, radiant, impossibly confident. Her deep brown skin glowed under the natural light pouring through the windows. A crimson dress wrapped around her figure like liquid fire, modest in cut but utterly impossible to ignore. The fabric hugged curves that seemed to defy the very foundation of Sung-hoon's existence. Her dark curls were styled in soft waves that framed her face. Her smile didn't ask for approval. It offered it. "Mr. Ryu," she said, her voice smooth as velvet and strong as steel. She extended her hand. "It's an honor." Sung-hoon stood, time fractured. His rule, 15 years of discipline, 15 years of protection, collapsed in a single heartbeat. He hesitated, just a fraction too long. Then he took her hand. Warm, firm, grounded. He pulled his own back quickly, as if burned. "Miss Sinclair," he said, his voice colder than he intended. He motioned toward the chair across from his desk. "Please, sit." As she moved, he noted everything against his will, the effortless grace in her stride, the way she carried herself with quiet authority, the subtle confidence that didn't demand attention but commanded it anyway. He tried not to stare. He failed. She noticed, of course. A flicker of awareness crossed her face, brief, knowing, but she didn't let it show. "Your resume is impressive," Sung-hoon said, flipping through the pages like a machine trying to distract itself from malfunctioning. "Why leave a position managing $200 million to apply here as a financial consultant?" Tiffany met his gaze without hesitation. "Because I want to work for someone who doesn't just manage money, he commands it. Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Ryu. I don't chase comfort, I chase excellence." The answer was both strategic and dangerously flattering. He hated how much he liked it. "And what makes you believe you can thrive under my expectations?" He leaned back slightly, studying her. She didn't blink. "Because I don't break under pressure, Mr. Ryu. I dismantle it." For the first time in years, Sung-hoon Ryu smiled. It was small, barely perceptible, gone almost as soon as it appeared. But it was there. They spoke for another 20 minutes. She answered every question with precision, challenged his assumptions with data, and never once faltered under his scrutiny. When she stood to leave, she extended her hand again. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Ryu." He shook it, this time holding on just a moment longer than necessary. "We'll be in touch, Miss Sinclair." She smiled, warm, knowing, dangerous, and walked out. The door closed behind her. Sung-hoon sat down slowly, staring at the empty chair across from him. The clock on the wall ticked. Tick, tick, tick. The sound felt louder now, heavier. Min Jae's voice crackled through the intercom. Well? What did you think? Sung-hoon didn't answer immediately. He straightened his cuffs, adjusted the files on his desk, and exhaled slowly. She's different, he finally said. Different good or different problematic? Sung-hoon stared at the door she'd walked through, his jaw tight. Hire her. Silence. I'm sorry. What? Trial basis, Sung-hoon interrupted, his tone clipped. 2 weeks. If she doesn't meet expectations, she's out. But even as he said it, Sung-hoon knew the truth. Tiffany Sinclair wasn't the one who might not fit. He was the one whose rules had just been rewritten, and he hated that he didn't hate it. The first week felt like warfare conducted in silence. Tiffany Sinclair arrived each morning at exactly 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes before Sung-hoon. She never asked permission to rearrange his filing systems or restructure his investment portfolios. She simply did it with an efficiency that bordered on surgical precision. By day 3, she'd identified $4.7 million in redundant offshore accounts and consolidated them into a single high-yield structure that increased liquidity by 22%. By day 5, she'd color-coded his entire financial calendar, cross-referenced it with market trend algorithms, and eliminated 17 unnecessary meetings that had been draining his time for months. Sung-hoon hated how much he needed her. More than that, he hated how much he wanted her presence. On Monday morning, she walked into his office carrying a small potted orchid, white petals with deep purple centers, and placed it on the corner of his desk without explanation. What is this? He asked, voice flat. Beauty, she said simply. Your office looked like a mausoleum. Now it looks like someone alive works here. She turned and walked out before he could respond. The orchid stayed. By the second week, the whispers started. Min Jae noticed it first during a briefing on territorial disputes in Busan. Sung-hoon had always delivered orders with icy finality. No room for debate, no tolerance for questions. But when Tiffany challenged his proposed budget allocation calmly, respectfully, but firmly, something unprecedented happened. He listened. The Busan expansion will cost 40% more than projected, Tiffany said, sliding a revised analysis across the table. Your current budget doesn't account for infrastructure delays or political bribes. You'll hemorrhage money in the first quarter. The room went silent. No one questioned Sung-hoon's strategies, ever. Sung-hoon leaned back, his dark eyes fixed on her. You're suggesting I'm miscalculating? I'm suggesting your data is incomplete, she replied evenly. There's a difference. A muscle ticked in his jaw. Then, impossibly, he picked up her report and read it. 5 minutes later, he looked up. Revise the budget. Use her numbers. The room exhaled collectively. After the meeting, Min Jae cornered Sung-hoon in the hallway. You're different with her. I'm efficient with her, Sung-hoon corrected coldly. You smiled at her this morning. I did not. You did, when she brought you tea instead of coffee because, and I quote, caffeine is making you aggressive. Sung-hoon's expression darkened. Drop it. But Min Jae didn't. The men are noticing. They're saying you're softer. Then the men need to focus on their jobs instead of mine. Min Jae studied him carefully. She doesn't know what you really are, does she? Sung-hoon's silence was answer enough. She will eventually, Min Jae warned. And when she does, you'll have to choose which version of yourself you want her to see. That night, Sung-hoon worked late. The Seoul skyline glittered beyond his windows, a kingdom of shadows and neon. He heard the soft click of heels on marble and knew, without looking, that it was her. You're still here, he said, not turning around. So are you. Tiffany appeared in his peripheral vision, her blazer draped over one arm. Don't you have a home to go to? This is my home. That's the saddest thing I've heard all week. She moved closer, standing beside him at the window. A man who rules a city but lives in an office. It's not an office. It's a command center. It's a cage, she said softly. A very expensive, very beautiful cage. He turned to face her then, his eyes searching hers. And what would you know about cages, Miss Sinclair? Her smile was small, sad, knowing. More than you think, Mr. Ryu. The air between them thickened. He could smell her perfume, something warm and subtly spiced, like cinnamon and amber. It made his carefully constructed walls feel dangerously thin. Why do you do this? He asked suddenly. Do what? Push, challenge, refuse to simply do what you're told. Tiffany tilted her head. Because you don't need another person who's afraid of you? You have an entire organization for that. What you need is someone who sees past the armor. I don't have armor. You are armor, she corrected. And it must be exhausting. Something cracked inside him, small, hairline, terrifying. You don't know anything about me, he said, his voice rougher than intended. I know you take your coffee black but prefer tea in the evening. I know you avoid looking at photographs on your desk. I know you never talk about family. I know you built this empire to protect something or hide from something." She paused. "And I know that underneath all this control, there's a man who's terrified of losing it." Sung-hoon stared at her, his heart hammering against his ribs. No one had ever spoken to him like this. No one had ever seen him like this. "You're overstepping," he said quietly. "Am I?" She held his gaze. "Or am I just telling you the truth no one else will?" He should have fired her. Should have reminded her of boundaries, of professional distance, of the fact that she was an employee and nothing more. Instead, he heard himself say, "The Busan deal, your analysis was correct. I would have lost millions. I know. He struggled for words. "You're invaluable." "I know that too." A hint of a smile touched her lips. "But thank you for saying it." She turned to leave. "Tiffany." She stopped, surprised. It was the first time he'd used her first name. "Yes?" "The orchid," he said, glancing at the plant on his desk. "It's not unwelcome." Her smile widened into something radiant. "Good night, Sung-hoon," and she was gone. He stood alone in the silence, his reflection ghostly in the darkened window. For the first time in 15 years, Sung-hoon Ryu felt something he'd thought he'd buried forever. Hope. And it terrified him. Over the next few days, the shift became undeniable. Sung-hoon found himself manufacturing reasons to call Tiffany into his office. Questions about quarterly projections, requests for updated market analyses, consultations that could have been emails but somehow required in-person discussions. His men noticed. His lieutenants exchanged glances. Min-jae watched with barely concealed concern. On Friday afternoon, Sung-hoon sat reviewing contracts when he realized he'd been staring at the same paragraph for 10 minutes. Because Tiffany was across the room, seated at the smaller desk he'd brought in for her, completely absorbed in her work. Sunlight caught the edges of her curls. She'd kicked off her heels under the desk, one foot tucked beneath her, and she was humming softly something he didn't recognize but found inexplicably soothing. She looked up. Their eyes met. She'd caught him watching. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air felt electric, charged with unspoken questions and dangerous possibilities. "Do I have something on my face?" she asked lightly, but her eyes held understanding. "No," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm what?" "Perfect," he thought. "Dangerous. Everything I swore to avoid." "You're doing excellent work," he finished lamely. Her smile was knowing, gentle, devastating. "Thank you, Sung-hoon." The way she said his name, warm, familiar, intimate, made something inside him shatter and rebuild simultaneously. He returned to his contracts, but the words were meaningless now. Because Tiffany Sinclair wasn't just changing his systems or reorganizing his finances, she was dismantling every defense he'd spent a lifetime constructing. And the most terrifying part? He was letting her. The cracks began to show during the third week. Tiffany was reviewing acquisition reports when she noticed something odd: discrepancies between Sung-hoon's publicly filed business holdings and the private accounts she managed. Shell corporations registered in the Cayman Islands. Cash flow patterns that didn't match legitimate business operations. Payment schedules that coincided with territorial disputes reported in the news. She sat back in her chair, the pieces assembling into a picture she deliberately avoided seeing. He's not just a businessman. That evening, as Seoul's skyline bled into shades of amber and violet, she found him standing at his window, his usual position when troubled. "We need to talk," she said quietly. He didn't turn. About the fact that half your revenue streams are illegal. About the fact that your security consultants are actually enforcers. About the fact that you're running a criminal empire alongside a legitimate business facade. She moved closer. "You're living in two worlds, Sung-hoon. One day, they're going to collide." His shoulders tensed. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. "You knew what I was when you took this position," he said finally, his voice cold. "I suspected. I didn't know." She crossed her arms. "And knowing changes things." He turned then, and the look in his eyes was dangerous, not threatening, but cornered. "Does it change your opinion of my financial decisions?" "No." "Then it's irrelevant." "It's not irrelevant to me," she said firmly. "Because one day, your enemies are going to use your legitimate businesses to hurt you. They're going to trace your money, your properties, your connections. And if I'm managing your finances, they're going to come for me too." Something flickered across his face. Concern? Fear? Gone too quickly to name. "I would never let anyone hurt you." "You can't promise that," Tiffany said softly. "No one can." The words triggered something in him. His expression shifted, a door slamming shut behind his eyes. Suddenly, he wasn't looking at her anymore, he was looking through her, into a past only he could see. Flashback. A child's laughter. His mother's voice warm and melodic, singing in the kitchen. Sung-hoon, come help me with dinner. She was beautiful, soft curves, wrapped in a floral dress, her smile like sunlight. She pulled him close, and he buried his face in the warmth of her embrace, breathing in jasmine and safety. Ioma, will you always be here? Always, my love, always. But always lasted exactly 3 more weeks. The ambush came at dawn, men in black masks storming through their home. His father, proud, strong, invincible, dragged into the courtyard. His mother's screams that stopped too abruptly when money changed hands. She'd sold them out. His soft, curvy, beautiful mother had traded their lives for her own survival. The last thing Sung-hoon saw before they took his father was her silhouette in the doorway, curves backlit by flames, turning away without looking back. End flashback. Sung-hoon? Tiffany's voice pulled him back. He realized his hands were trembling. Get out, he said quietly. What? Get out! The words exploded from him, sharp and brutal. You don't know anything about my world. You don't know what it costs to survive in it. You walk in here with your judgment and your questions, thinking you can... He stopped, breathing hard. Tiffany stood frozen, her eyes wide. Not with fear, but with hurt. I wasn't judging you, she said, her voice steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes. I was trying to understand you. I don't need your understanding. I need you to do your job and stay out of my past. The words hit her like physical blows. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin. Fine, she said quietly. Consider the boundary established. She walked toward the door with measured dignity, each step controlled despite the emotion threatening to break through. Tiffany. She didn't stop. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than any slam. Sung-hoon stood alone in his office, his reflection staring back at him from the darkened window. What have I done? His phone buzzed. Min-jae's name flashed across the screen. What? Sung-hoon snapped. Just got word from our contacts in the Busan faction. They're asking questions about your new consultant, about how close she's gotten to your operations. Sung-hoon's blood ran cold. What kind of questions? The dangerous kind. They think she's a weakness. They're floating the idea that removing her might destabilize your control. Tell them if anyone touches her, I'll burn Busan to the ground. Silence on the other end. Hyung, Min-jae said carefully. You just proved their point. Sung-hoon ended the call. He stared at the orchid on his desk, the one Tiffany had brought to add life to his mausoleum. Its white petals seemed to glow in the dim light, fragile and perfect. He picked up his phone again and scrolled to her contact. His thumb hovered over her name. I'm sorry, felt inadequate. I was scared, felt too vulnerable. You remind me of the woman who destroyed my family, would destroy everything. He set the phone down without sending anything. Outside, Seoul glittered with indifferent beauty. Somewhere in that vast city, Tiffany was probably crying. Or furious. Or both. And it was his fault. For the first time in years, Sung-hoon Ryu felt something worse than fear. He felt shame. The next morning, Tiffany arrived exactly at 7:45 a.m., as always. But something had changed. Her warmth had been replaced by professional courtesy. Her challenges had been replaced by compliance. Her presence had become an absence wrapped in politeness. She did her job flawlessly. She didn't meet his eyes. During a late morning briefing with department heads, she presented her analysis with clinical precision. No personal asides, no gentle humor, no connection. When the meeting ended, she gathered her materials and headed for the door. Miss Sinclair, Sung-hoon said formally. A moment, please. She paused, waited for the room to clear, then turned to face him with perfect professional distance. Yes, Mr. Ryu? Mr. Ryu. Not Sung-hoon. The return to formality cut deeper than he expected. About yesterday. There's nothing to discuss, she interrupted politely. You established appropriate boundaries. I respect that. I shouldn't have raised my voice. You're the boss. You can speak however you want. Her tone was pleasant, empty. Is there anything else? Yes, he wanted to say. Come back. Let me explain. Let me tell you why curves terrify me, why softness feels like betrayal, why you scare me more than any enemy I've ever faced. Instead, he said, No. That's all. She nodded and left. Sung-hoon sat in the silence that followed, surrounded by his perfect control and his immaculate empire. It had never felt more like a prison. The encrypted file appeared 3 weeks later, buried in a financial system restoration Tiffany was conducting. She'd been working late, cross-referencing corrupted data from a server migration, when the folder appeared locked with military-grade encryption but accidentally exposed during the file recovery process. Ambush. Report. 1989. PDF. Her finger hovered over the mousepad. Every instinct screamed this was private, dangerous territory. But curiosity and a growing need to understand the man who haunted her thoughts won. The file opened. What she found shattered her. The report was clinical, detailed, horrifying. A planned ambush of Ryu Jinwoo, prominent Seoul businessman, and his family. The attack coordinated by the Hwang faction in a territorial dispute. The ambush successful due to insider information provided by Ryu Jinwoo's wife. Informant. Ryu Mi-seon, wife. Payment. 50 million plus safe passage to Japan. Outcome. Target eliminated. Wife extracted successfully. Son, age 12, witnessed execution. Tiffany's hands trembled as she scrolled through witness statements, photographs of crime scenes, psychological evaluations of the surviving child. Sung-hoon Ryu, age 12. Trauma response. Extreme emotional withdrawal. Refusal to speak for 6 months. Developed hypervigilance toward female figures, particularly those matching mother's physical profile. Curvy build. Soft features. Recommendation. Long-term psychological intervention. The file included photos. A 12-year-old boy with hollow eyes, standing over his father's grave. His mother nowhere in the frames, already vanished to her new life purchased with blood money. And then, a handwritten note in the margin, in Sung-hoon's adult handwriting. Softness is betrayal. Curves are weapons. Never again. Tiffany closed the laptop. Her hands covered her mouth as tears slid down her cheeks. He wasn't born cold. He was broken into it. Suddenly everything made sense. The rule, the control. The walls he'd built so high even he couldn't see over them. And she'd walked into his life wrapped in everything that traumatized him. Demanding he be vulnerable. Pushing past his defenses. I've been asking him to trust the very thing that destroyed him. But worse than understanding his pain was confronting her own truth. She was falling for him. Not the polished businessman. Not even the dangerous crime lord. The broken 12-year-old boy who'd built an empire just to feel safe. And loving Sung-hoon Ryu was a death sentence. The realization hit her with crushing clarity. She couldn't stay. Not because of the danger, though that was real. Not because of the moral complexity, though that existed. She had to leave because staying meant watching herself fall deeper in love with a man whose trauma would never allow him to love her back. She drafted the resignation letter that night, her tears staining the paper. The next morning, she arrived at 7:45 a.m. As always. But instead of her usual work, she held a single envelope. Sung-hoon looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his features. You're early. I need to give you something. She placed the envelope on his desk. He stared at it like it might explode. What is this? My resignation. Effective immediately. The blood drained from his face. What? I can't work here anymore. Her voice trembled despite her best efforts. I'm sorry. He stood, moving around the desk. Why? Did someone threaten you? Did Min Jae? No one threatened me. Then what? Is it the money? I'll double your salary. Triple it. It's not about money, Sung-hoon. Then what? His voice cracked. Tell me what I did wrong. She met his eyes, and the pain in them nearly broke her resolve. You didn't do anything wrong. That's the problem. She took a shaky breath. I found the file. About your father, about your mother, about what happened to you. He went perfectly still. You had no right. I know, and I'm sorry, but now I understand. Her voice softened. I understand why you built that rule. Why you keep people at arm's length. Why you look at me like I'm something dangerous. Tiffany, I can't stay near you and pretend I'm not falling into something dangerous, she said, the words tumbling out. Not the danger of your world, the danger of caring too much about someone who can't care back. That's not... He stepped closer. You don't understand. I understand that you're still that scared 12-year-old boy, she said gently. And you deserve healing, Sung-hoon. But I can't be the one who breaks herself trying to fix you. The silence between them was crushing. Please don't go, he said, and the rawness in his voice shattered something in her chest. I have to. No, you don't. Stay, please. He moved closer, and for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes, real, desperate fear. I'll change. I'll give you anything you want. Just don't leave. It was the pleas that destroyed her. The begging that revealed just how much she'd already crawled under his armor. But that's exactly why she had to go. Goodbye, Sung-hoon. She walked toward the door, each step feeling like dying slowly. Tiffany, please. Letting me go is the kindest thing you can do for both of us. She opened the door. I'm not kind, he said quietly. I'm selfish, and I don't want you to leave. She paused, her hand on the doorframe, not turning back because if she saw his face, she'd crumble. Then learn to want what's good for you instead of what's safe. The door closed behind her. Sung-hoon stood frozen in his office, staring at the resignation letter on his desk. For the first time in 24 years, since the morning his father died, Sung-hoon Ryu cried. Pause for just a second if this story has you on the edge of your seat. Hit that like button and subscribe. The next part is going to blow your mind. The news rippled through Seoul's underworld like blood in water. Sung-hoon Ryu was compromised, the feared head of the most powerful crime syndicate in Korea. The man who'd built an empire on ice and discipline had let a woman under his skin, and then let her walk away. Weakness had a name, Tiffany Sinclair, and in their world, weakness was an invitation. The order came from the Hwang faction, the same organization that had orchestrated his father's murder. They'd been waiting years for an opening, and now they'd found it. Target: Tiffany Sinclair. Objective: elimination. Timeline: Charity Gala, December 15th. Method: clean. No traces back to us. Min Jae discovered the hit order purely by accident. He'd been meeting with an informant in Gangnam, extracting information about a rival's shipping routes. When the man mentioned something in passing, something about the Jamaican woman and loose ends being tied up at the charity event, Min Jae's blood froze. He called Sung-hoon immediately. It was 6:47 p.m. Hyung, we have a problem. Sung-hoon sat in his darkened office, a glass of whiskey untouched on his desk. He'd been sitting there for 3 days, staring at Tiffany's resignation letter like it might spontaneously rewrite itself. What problem? The Hwang faction issued a contract on Tiffany Sinclair. The glass shattered against the floor. What did you say? There's a hit tonight, at the charity gala. She's speaking there, some event for empowering women of color in business. They know she'll be exposed, vulnerable. Sung-hoon was already moving, grabbing his jacket, his phone. How long until the event? It starts at 7:30. She's scheduled to speak at 8:15. He checked his watch. 6:51 p.m. The gala was across the city. Rush hour traffic. Too far. Too late. Get every man we have to that location. Now. Hyung. If we show up in force, it'll start a war. I don't care if it starts Armageddon, Sung-hoon snarled. Get them there. He raced down to his private garage, threw himself into his Aston Martin, and tore into Seoul's traffic like a man possessed. The city blurred past him, lights, sounds, people living normal lives while his world disintegrated in slow motion. Please let me be in time. He'd spent 3 days drowning in regret, replaying their last conversation, hating himself for letting her walk away. He'd drafted 100 texts and deleted them all. He'd stood outside her apartment building twice, unable to summon the courage to knock. Now all of that felt absurdly trivial, because she might die, and it would be his fault. The gala was at the Grand Hyatt Seoul, an elegant high-rise with crystal chandeliers, and Seoul's elite mingling in designer gowns and tailored suits. Security was tight but focused on preventing party crashers, not professional assassins. Sung-hoon abandoned his car at the valet, barely hearing the attendants' protests, and pushed through the lobby. His phone buzzed. Min Jae, our men are in position. We've identified 2 possible shooters, one on the balcony level, one near the service entrance. Both have clear sightlines to the stage. Take them out quietly. No panic, no chaos. What about you? I'm going to find her. The ballroom was packed with hundreds of guests. Sung-hoon scanned the crowd desperately, his heart hammering. Where is she? A voice echoed through the sound system, smooth, professional, introducing the keynote speaker. A woman who has broken barriers in international finance, a voice for representation and resilience. Please welcome Tiffany Sinclair. Applause erupted, and there she was, walking onto the stage in a stunning emerald gown that caught the light like water. Her curls swept elegantly to one side, her smile confident and radiant. She had no idea death was circling her. Sung-hoon pushed through the crowd, earning annoyed glares and muttered complaints, his eyes locked on the stage. His phone buzzed again. Min Jae. Balcony shooter neutralized. Service entrance shooter is moving. We lost visual. Sung-hoon's blood turned to ice. Tiffany stepped up to the microphone, and the room fell silent. Good evening, she began, her voice clear and strong. I want to talk tonight about what it means to exist in spaces that weren't built for you. Sung-hoon's eyes scanned the room frantically, searching shadows, analyzing angles, looking for the glint of a scope, the shift of fabric, anything. There, near the side exit. A man in a service uniform, hand reaching inside his jacket. Sung-hoon moved. He shoved through the final cluster of guests, drawing startled gasps, and reached the man just as the gun cleared his jacket. The suppressed pistol swung toward the stage, toward Tiffany. Sung-hoon caught the man's wrist mid-draw, twisted it with brutal efficiency, and slammed him against the wall. The gun clattered to the floor. Who sent you? Sung-hoon hissed in Korean. The man's eyes widened in recognition and terror. Ryu, who sent you? Hwang faction. Please. I have a family. Sung-hoon's fist connected with his jaw, and the man crumpled. Security rushed toward them, but Min-jae appeared from nowhere, flashing credentials. Private security. We've contained the threat. Notify your team to check all service personnel. On stage, Tiffany continued speaking, completely unaware. Because when we walk into these rooms, we bring more than just our qualifications. We bring the courage to exist in spaces that would rather we didn't. Sung-hoon stared at her, his heart still racing, his hands still trembling with adrenaline and rage and terror. She was alive. She was safe. And she had no idea how close she'd come to dying. Hyung. Min-jae touched his shoulder. We should leave before... No. Sung-hoon's voice was hoarse. I need to see her. That's not a good idea. If she sees you here, she'll ask questions. I don't care. He positioned himself in the shadows at the back of the ballroom and watched her finish her speech. She was magnificent. Fierce and vulnerable. Powerful and genuine. Speaking truths that made the room hang on every word. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. And Sung-hoon realized with crushing clarity, he loved her. He'd been running from it, denying it, hiding behind trauma and rules and fear. But watching her stand in that light, radiating strength and grace, he couldn't lie to himself anymore. He loved Tiffany Sinclair, and that meant he had to let her go, because his love was a death sentence. And she deserved better than a life spent dodging bullets meant for him. He turned to leave, but then their eyes met across the crowded room. She froze mid-step, her expression shifting from surprise to confusion to something softer, more dangerous. She'd seen him, and there was no walking away now. Tiffany excused herself from the cluster of congratulatory guests and moved through the crowd with purpose. Sung-hoon watched her approach like a man watching a storm roll in beautiful, powerful, inevitable. She stopped 3 feet away, close enough that he could see the questions in her eyes, far enough to maintain her composure. What are you doing here? She asked quietly. The ballroom buzzed around them, but Sung-hoon heard only her voice. I needed to see you, he said. Why? Because someone tried to kill you. Because I can't breathe when you're not near me. Because I've spent 3 days drowning in my own emptiness. Because your speech was remarkable, he said instead. A flicker of hurt crossed her face. You came all the way here to tell me I gave a good speech? Tiffany. No. She shook her head. You don't get to do this. You don't get to show up at my events and say pretty things after pushing me away. I know. Then why are you here, Sung-hoon? The honest answer would destroy them both. So he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, a formal offer letter he'd had his lawyers draft that afternoon in a moment of desperate delusion. I want you to come back, he said. She stared at the envelope like it was poison. Come back? As what? As my executive consultant. Double your previous salary, full executive benefits, your own team, complete autonomy over financial operations. He extended the envelope. I'm offering you everything. Tiffany didn't take it. Everything, she repeated, her voice dangerous quiet. Everything except the one thing that matters. What do you mean? She stepped closer, and despite himself, his breath caught. Do you want me back because I'm useful, Sung-hoon? Because I make your systems efficient and your portfolios profitable? You're invaluable. Or do you want me back because I matter to you? The question hung between them like a blade. Because those are very different things. The ballroom felt suddenly too hot, too crowded, too exposed. Sung-hoon's carefully prepared speech disintegrated. He faltered. Your expertise is... My expertise? The hurt in her voice cut deeper than any weapon. I spent 3 weeks working beside you. I challenged you. I made you laugh. I brought life into that mausoleum you call an office. Her eyes glistened. And all you can offer me is a salary? Tiffany, it's not that simple. Yes, it is, she said firmly. Either I matter to you as a person, or I'm just a very efficient employee. Which is it? You matter more than anything, he wanted to scream. You matter so much that men tried to kill you tonight just to hurt me. You matter so much that I spent 3 days losing my mind. You matter so much that I'm terrified of what happens if I admit it. But the words stuck in his throat, trapped behind 15 years of trauma and self-protection. His silence stretched too long. Tiffany's expression shifted from hurt to resignation. That's what I thought. Wait, I can't do this anymore, Sung-hoon. She backed away. I can't keep hoping you'll let me in. You don't understand what you're asking. I'm asking you to be human. The words burst from her. I'm asking you to feel something beyond control and calculation. I'm asking you to... She stopped, catching herself, swallowing the rest. To what? He asked quietly. It doesn't matter. She straightened her spine. lifted her chin the same posture she'd used when she walked into his office that first day. "Goodbye, Mr. Ryu. Thank you for the offer, but I decline." She turned to leave. "Someone tried to kill you tonight," Sung-hoon said. She froze. "What?" "The Hwang faction issued a contract. 2 shooters positioned at this event. I neutralized them before you took the stage." His voice was flat, factual, hiding the terror underneath. "That's why I'm here, not for your speech. To keep you alive." Tiffany turned slowly, her face pale. "You... what?" "They see you as my weakness." And they're right. The admission cost him everything. "Every enemy I have now knows that hurting you hurts me. That's what loving someone in my world means, making them a target." Her eyes widened. "Loving someone?" He realized too late what he'd said. "I didn't mean..." "Yes, you did." She moved closer, searching his face. "You love me?" "It doesn't matter what I feel," he said desperately. "Don't you understand? Caring about you makes you vulnerable. Every day you're connected to me is a day someone might use you to destroy me. So your solution is to push me away?" Her voice cracked. "To pretend you don't feel anything? My solution is to keep you alive." His control finally shattered. "I would rather spend the rest of my life watching you from a distance than attend your funeral because someone wanted to hurt me." Tears slid down her cheeks. "You don't get to decide that for me. I already have." "No." She shook her head. "You're choosing fear over love. You're choosing the same prison you've been living in for years. I'm choosing your safety." "I don't want safety." The words echoed through the ballroom, turning heads. She lowered her voice. "I want you. The real you. Not this empty shell who hides behind rules and distance. That man doesn't exist anymore." "Yes, he does." She touched his face gently, and he flinched like she'd burned him. "I see him every time you look at me. Every time you almost smile. Every time you let yourself be human for half a second before remembering you're not supposed to feel anything." He caught her wrist, his grip gentle but firm. "You're killing me? Then let yourself die," she whispered. "And live for the first time." The moment hung between them, electric and impossible. Then Sung-hoon's phone buzzed. Min-jae's message flashed across the screen. "Third shooter identified. Northeast corner. He has a clean shot." Terror flooded Sung-hoon's veins. He grabbed Tiffany's wrist and pulled her down just as the suppressed gunshot shattered the champagne flute 2 feet from where her head had been. Screams erupted. Guests scattered. Chaos exploded through the ballroom. Sung-hoon covered Tiffany's body with his own, his heart hammering against her back. "Stay down." He felt her trembling beneath him, heard her sharp intake of breath. Min-jae and his team materialized from the crowd, guns drawn, moving with practiced efficiency toward the northeast corner. Security alarms wailed. Hotel staff shouted conflicting orders. "We need to move," Sung-hoon said quietly. "Now." He pulled Tiffany to her feet and guided her toward the service exit, using his body as a shield. His men formed a protective perimeter around them. "What's happening?" Tiffany asked, her voice shaking. "I'm taking you somewhere safe." "Where?" "The only place they'll never find you." He led her through back corridors, past startled hotel staff, down a service elevator, and out into the underground parking garage where his Aston Martin waited. "Get in." She hesitated. "Sung-hoon, please," he said, and the raw desperation in his voice made her move. She slid into the passenger seat. He took the wheel, and they tore out of the garage into Seoul's glittering night. Behind them, sirens wailed. His phone exploded with messages. The city blurred past. But all Sung-hoon could focus on was the woman beside him, alive, shaking, beautiful, and more dangerous to his carefully constructed world than any enemy he'd ever faced. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly. He glanced at her, then back at the road. "The only place I've ever felt safe," and he drove them toward the mountains. The drive took 2 hours. They wound through Seoul's luminous sprawl, past sleeping suburbs, into forested mountains where civilization thinned to scattered lights and empty roads. Neither spoke. The silence between them was heavy with unasked questions and unspoken truths. Tiffany watched the darkness swallow the city behind them and wondered if she'd just made the most dangerous decision of her life or the only honest one. The safe house appeared suddenly, a traditional Hainok-style home nestled into the mountainside, invisible from the main road. Stone walls, curved tile roof, paper lanterns glowing softly in the darkness. It looked like something from another century, untouched by the violence and chaos of Sung-hoon's world. He parked and killed the engine. The silence grew heavier. "This is it," he said quietly. "It's beautiful. It was my grandmother's." He stared at the house like it might vanish. "The only place they never found. The only place I never brought my work. Why did you bring me here?" He didn't answer immediately. When he finally turned to look at her, his expression was raw, unguarded, the armor gone. Because you asked me to be human, he said. And this is the only place I remember how. They walked inside together. The interior was simple but elegant wood floors, low furniture, walls lined with books and photographs. A fire burned in the traditional hearth, casting dancing shadows. It smelled like pine and old paper and something indefinably comforting. Sit, Sung-hoon said, gesturing to the cushions near the fire. I'll make tea. You make tea? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. My grandmother taught me. She said a man who can't make tea for guests has forgotten he's human. Tiffany sat, watching him move through the space with unexpected grace. He prepared the tea with methodical care, heating the water, measuring the leaves, pouring with practiced precision. When he handed her the cup, their fingers brushed, and electricity sparked between them. Sung-hoon, she said softly, why am I really here? He sat across from her, cradling his own cup, staring into the amber liquid like it held answers. Because I need to tell you something, he said. And if I don't say it now, I never will. Tell me. He took a shaky breath. My mother's name was Ryu Mision. She was beautiful, curvy, warm, the kind of woman who lit up rooms just by existing. My father adored her. I worshipped her. His voice cracked. She sang to me every night before bed. She made my favorite foods. She told me I was her whole world. Tiffany listened, her heart breaking with every word. I was 12 when I learned it was a lie. When the Huang faction came for my father, they came because she invited them. She sold us out for money and safe passage to Japan. He finally looked up, and his eyes were glassy with unshed tears. I watched them kill him in our courtyard. I watched her take the money and leave without looking back. Sung-hoon. After that, I was sent to live with distant relatives who didn't want me. I was a reminder of scandal and failure, so I learned to be cold. I learned to be useful. I learned that softness was weakness, and curves were weapons. He set down his cup with trembling hands. I built my empire on one principle. Never trust anything that reminds you of what broke you. That's why you made the rule, Tiffany said quietly. Yes, he laughed bitterly. Pathetic, isn't it? A grown man terrified of curves because his mother happened to have them. It's not pathetic. It's human. It's a prison, he corrected. And then you walked into my office, and every wall I built started crumbling. You challenged me. You saw through me. You made me want things I swore I'd never want again. His voice dropped to a whisper. You terrified me. I still do, she said. Yes, he met her eyes. But now I'm more terrified of losing you than of letting you in. Tiffany set down her own cup and moved closer, closing the distance between them. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you, he said, the words raw and desperate. I've been in love with you since you put that orchid on my desk and told me my office looked like a mausoleum. I've been in love with you through every argument, every challenge, every moment you refused to be intimidated by me. Tears streamed down her face. Then why did you push me away? Because loving you feels like standing at the edge of war, he admitted. It feels like choosing vulnerability over survival. It feels like everything I swore I'd never do again. And now? He reached out with a shaking hand and touched her face the first time he'd allowed himself to touch her without flinching. Now I'm done being the man my trauma made me. I want to be the man you see when you look at me. Who's that? Someone worth saving, he whispered. Tiffany leaned into his touch, her own hand covering his. You don't need saving, Sung-hoon. You need permission to stop punishing yourself for being hurt. His composure finally shattered. A sob tore from his throat, decades of grief and pain and loneliness erupting in a single, devastating sound. Tiffany pulled him into her arms, and he collapsed against her, his face buried in her shoulder, his body shaking with the weight of everything he'd carried alone for so long. I'm sorry, he gasped between sobs. I'm sorry I pushed you away. I'm sorry I made you feel like you didn't matter. I'm sorry. Shh. She held him tighter, her own tears soaking into his hair. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. They stayed like that for a long time, two broken people holding each other together in the firelight, the city's chaos, a distant memory. The world reduced to warmth and heartbeat and the terrifying courage of being seen. When Sung-hoon finally pulled back, his eyes were red but clear. I don't deserve you. Probably not, she said with a watery smile. But you're stuck with me anyway. Tiffany. I love you too, she interrupted. I've been in love with you since you smiled at me in that first interview. I've been in love with you through every wall you put up, every time you tried to push me away, every moment you almost let yourself be human. He stared at her like she was a miracle he couldn't quite believe. How can you love me after everything? Because I see you, she said simply. Not the Mafia boss, not the trauma survivor, Not the man you think you're supposed to be. I see the person underneath all that armor, the one who makes tea because his grandmother taught him, who keeps an orchid on his desk because it reminds him to breathe, who's terrified of softness but desperately craves it. I don't know how to be that person. Then let me teach you. She took his face in her hands. Let me show you what it feels like to be loved without conditions, to be held without judgment, to be human without apologizing for it. I'm going to disappoint you. Probably, she agreed. And I'm going to challenge you. We're going to fight and struggle and probably drive each other crazy. Then why? Because that's what love is, she said. It's choosing each other even when it's hard. It's breaking each other's rules and building new ones together. Sung-hoon searched her face, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign she didn't mean it. He found only truth. Please don't leave, he whispered, his voice breaking. Please stay with me. I'm begging you. I know I don't deserve it, but please. I'm staying, she said firmly. But on one condition. Anything. You have to promise to let me in. Really in. No more walls. No more hiding. No more pretending you don't feel things. He hesitated for only a moment. Then he nodded. I promise. Tiffany leaned forward and kissed him soft, gentle. A question and an answer all at once. Sung-hoon froze, overwhelmed by sensation, by softness, by the intimacy he'd denied himself for so long. Then he kissed her back, his hands trembling as they found her waist, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, years of loneliness and longing pouring into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sung-hoon rested his forehead against hers. You saved me, he whispered. No, Tiffany corrected. You saved yourself. I just reminded you that you were worth saving. They sat in the firelight, holding each other, and for the first time in 24 years, Sung-hoon Ryu felt something he thought he'd lost forever. Peace. The peace lasted exactly 48 hours. They'd spent 2 days in the mountain safe house, existing in a bubble where Seoul's violence couldn't touch them. But reality came crashing back through a phone call from Min Jae at dawn on the third day. Hyung, we have a situation. Sung-hoon was instantly alert. What kind of situation? The kind where your cousin just called an emergency council meeting, and he didn't invite you. Sung-hoon's blood ran cold. Jae-sung? What's he doing? From what our informants are saying? Staging a coup. He's convinced the top lieutenants that you've been compromised by Tiffany. He's arguing you're unfit to lead. Tiffany appeared in the doorway, wrapped in one of Sung-hoon's shirts, her hair tousled. What's wrong? He mouthed, I'll tell you in a minute, and returned to the call. Where's the meeting? The Dragon's Head restaurant in Gangnam. Noon. Your presence would be advisable. I'll be there. He ended the call and turned to Tiffany. We need to go back to Seoul. What happened? My cousin is trying to overthrow me. He's using you as proof that I'm weak. Instead of looking afraid, Tiffany's expression hardened with determination. Then we prove him wrong. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is, she interrupted. If he's using me as a weapon against you, then I'm already in this fight. The only question is whether I'm beside you or hiding while you face it alone. Sung-hoon stared at her, something swelling in his chest pride. Gratitude, love. You're remarkable, he said. I know. She kissed him quickly. Now let's go remind your cousin why you're the one in charge. They arrived in Seoul with an hour to spare. Sung-hoon went straight to his office to gather intelligence, while Tiffany made calls of her own, reaching out to contacts she'd made during her time as his consultant, people who owed her favors. When Sung-hoon walked into the Dragon's Head at 11:58 a.m., the private room fell silent. 12 men sat around a traditional low table, the heads of his major divisions. At the far end sat Ryu Jae-sung, Sung-hoon's cousin, 34 years old with a politician's smile and a snake's eyes. Cousin, Jae-sung said smoothly. How unexpected. I thought you were occupied. I was, Sung-hoon said, taking his seat at the head of the table. Now I'm here. Shall we begin? Jae-sung's smile tightened. Actually, we've already begun. We're discussing the future of this organization. Without its leader? That sounds like treason. It sounds like concern, Jae-sung corrected. You've been distracted, Hyung. This woman, this consultant, has made you soft. She's a liability. Miss Sinclair reorganized our financial systems and increased our profits by 23% in 3 weeks, Sung-hoon said coldly. That's not a liability. That's an asset. She's made you emotional, one of the lieutenants said. You've changed. You're not the man we followed. You're right, Sung-hoon said. I'm better. The room shifted uncomfortably. Better? Jae-sung laughed. You've broken your own rules. You've exposed us to risk. You've let a woman, an outsider, into our operations. That's not strength. That's weakness. Then let's talk about weakness, a new voice said. Every head turned. Tiffany stood in the doorway, dressed in a sharp black suit, her presence commanding immediate attention. She moved into the room with the same confidence she'd brought to Sung-hoon's office that first day. "Miss Sinclair," Jae-sung said with barely concealed contempt. "This is a private meeting, and yet I'm the subject," she replied smoothly. "It seems appropriate that I attend." She didn't wait for permission. She sat beside Sung-hoon, her shoulder touching his, a statement of unity. "Gentlemen," she began, "I understand your concerns. Change is frightening, especially in an organization built on tradition and predictability. But let's examine the actual facts." She pulled out a tablet and projected financial data onto the wall screen. "Since I began working with Sung-hoon, operational efficiency has increased 31%. Profit margins are up 23%. Legal exposure is down 47% due to better shell company structures. You're making more money with less risk." She paused. "Those are the numbers. Now let's talk about leadership." "What would you know about leadership?" one lieutenant challenged. "I know that a leader who can't evolve will eventually be overthrown by someone who can," she said calmly. "I know that strength isn't refusing to feel, it's having the courage to feel and still make hard decisions. And I know that every man in this room has benefited from Sung-hoon's evolution, even if you're too proud to admit it." Jae-sung leaned forward. "You've made him weak." "No," Tiffany said. "I've made him human, and humans are far more dangerous than machines." "She's right," Min-jae spoke up from his position near the door. "Hyung is still the most effective leader we've had. The Hwang faction is fracturing because of his strategies. The police investigations have gone cold because of his planning. We control more territory now than we did 6 months ago." "Because I'm emotional?" Sung-hoon asked quietly. "Because you're engaged," Min-jae corrected. "You're not just going through motions anymore. You're building something." "He's building a liability," Jae-sung snapped. "The Hwang faction already tried to kill her. Next time they'll succeed, and where will we be?" "Protected," Tiffany said. "Because I just bought us protection." She pulled up another document, a contract with the Kim family syndicate in Busan, one of the most powerful independent factions in Korea. "I spent this morning negotiating an alliance," she explained. "In exchange for a 15% profit share on our Busan operations, the Kim family has agreed to protect me and guarantee neutrality in any internal disputes. They've also agreed to supply intelligence on the Hwang faction." The room went silent. "How did you—" one lieutenant started. "I managed the Kim family's daughter's investment portfolio 5 years ago," Tiffany said. "She owed me a favor. I called it in." Sung-hoon stared at her, stunned and impossibly proud. Jae-sung's face darkened. "You had no authority." "I had every authority," Tiffany corrected. "As Sung-hoon's partner." "Partner?" Jae-sung's voice dripped with venom. "You're a consultant. A temporary hire. A distraction. I'm the woman who just secured an alliance you've been trying to negotiate for 2 years, she replied. "I'm the woman who increased your profits while you were plotting coups. And I'm the woman standing beside the man you'll never replace." She stood, and something in her presence made every man in the room lean back. "Gentlemen, you have a choice," she said. "You can follow Jae-sung into a war you'll lose because the Kim family won't support you. The financial systems will collapse without my structure, and Sung-hoon will dismantle you piece by piece. Or you can accept that evolution isn't weakness. It's survival." Silence. Then, slowly, one lieutenant stood and bowed to Sung-hoon, then another, then another. Within moments, 11 of the 12 men had declared their loyalty. Only Jae-sung remained seated, his face twisted with rage. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Yes," Sung-hoon said, standing. "It is. You're out. Your division is dissolved. Your assets are forfeit. You have 24 hours to leave Seoul. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was tolerating your jealousy as long as I did." Sung-hoon's voice was ice. "Get out." Jae-sung stood, his chair scraping loudly. He glared at Tiffany with pure hatred. "This is your fault," he hissed. "No," Tiffany said calmly. "This is yours. You confused control with strength. You confused isolation with power. And you confused your cousin's evolution with weakness." Jae-sung stormed out. The remaining men relaxed visibly. "Well," Min-jae said with a slight smile. "That was entertaining. That was terrifying," one lieutenant admitted. "Miss Sinclair, you're either very brave or very foolish." "Both," she said, usually simultaneously. After the meeting ended and they were alone in Sung-hoon's office, he pulled her into his arms. "That was incredible," he said. "That was necessary," she corrected. "You're not allowed to face wars alone anymore. I'm not used to having a partner. Get used to it." She kissed him softly. "Because you're stuck with me now." He held her hand the first time he'd done so in public, in front of his men, without hesitation or shame. It was a declaration louder than any words. Tiffany Sinclair wasn't his weakness. She was his power, and everyone in Seoul would know it. 3 months later, Seoul glittered under winter snow. The city had settled into a new equilibrium. Jae-sung had fled to Taiwan, his loyalists scattered or absorbed into other divisions. The alliance with the Kim family had held strong, opening new trade routes and protection networks. The Hwang faction had been systematically dismantled through a combination of Sung-hoon's strategic brilliance and Tiffany's financial maneuvering. The organization was stronger than ever, and Sung-hoon Ryu was different. His men noticed it in small ways, the softness around his eyes when Tiffany entered a room, the ease in his posture during meetings, the occasional laugh that escaped him when she challenged his decisions. He was still formidable, still calculating, still dangerous, but he was also, impossibly, happy. On a Friday evening, Sung-hoon closed his office door and found Tiffany at her desk, now permanently positioned beside his reviewing quarterly reports. "Come with me," he said. She looked up, suspicious. "Where?" "It's a surprise. I don't like surprises. You'll like this one." He extended his hand. "Trust me." She took it, and they left Seoul behind. The drive to the mountain safe house felt different now, not an escape but a homecoming. When they arrived, the hanok was lit with paper lanterns, warm light spilling into the winter darkness. "What is this?" Tiffany asked. "This is me being honest," Sung-hoon said. He led her inside to the hearth where a fire crackled. On the low table sat 2 cups of tea, still steaming. "Sit," he said gently. She sat, curiosity and caution warring in her expression. Sung-hoon knelt across from her, and for a moment, he simply looked at her, memorizing the way firelight played across her skin, the way her curls framed her face, the way she looked at him like he was worth believing in. "I've spent my entire adult life following rules," he began. "Most of them were designed to protect me from being hurt again. But the one rule I'm most infamous for, the rule everyone in Seoul knows, that rule almost destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me." Tiffany's eyes glistened. "Sung-hoon, let me finish," he said softly. "The rule was never about curves or bodies or aesthetics. It was about fear. Fear of softness. Fear of trust. Fear of being the vulnerable 12-year-old boy who lost everything because he loved someone who didn't deserve it." He reached across the table and took her hands. "You taught me that the only thing more dangerous than being hurt is never letting yourself feel anything. You taught me that strength isn't about control, it's about courage. And you taught me that the woman I tried to keep out of my life was the only one capable of giving it meaning." A tear slid down her cheek. "I'm abolishing the old rule," he said. "No more fear. No more hiding. No more letting trauma dictate my future." "What's the new rule?" she whispered. "That love is worth the risk," he said. "That vulnerability is strength. And that the only rule worth following is this: no fear will rule this house again." He released one of her hands and reached into his jacket, pulling out a small box. Tiffany's breath caught. "I'm not proposing with diamonds or gold," Sung-hoon said, opening the box to reveal a simple silver band with a single engraved line in Korean. "I'm proposing with honesty. With the promise that I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you didn't break my rule, you saved me from it." Tiffany read the engraving, fresh tears streaming down her face. "너는 나의 용기다. You are my courage." "Tiffany Sinclair," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "Will you marry me? Will you stand beside me, not behind me, not in my shadow, but beside me, and build something neither of us could build alone?" She stared at the ring, then at him, then laughed through her tears. "You're really doing this?" "I'm really doing this. The feared Mafia boss of Seoul is proposing to the curvy Jamaican woman he once banned from his office. Yes, that's the most ridiculous, beautiful, insane thing I've ever heard. Is that a yes?" She leaned across the table and kissed him, fierce, passionate, full of promise. "Yes," she said against his lips. "Yes, yes, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she held it up to the firelight, watching it catch and gleam. "I love you," he said. "I know," she smiled. "I've known since the day you kept that orchid on your desk." They stayed in the safe house that night, wrapped in each other and the future they were building together. 2 weeks later, Sung-hoon called a full council meeting, every lieutenant, every division head, every major player in his organization. When everyone had assembled in the private conference room, he stood at the head of the table with Tiffany beside him. "I have an announcement," he began. The room fell silent. "Many of you know about the rule I enforced for years: no curvy women in my presence, my office, or my organization. That rule is hereby abolished." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "In its place, I'm establishing new leadership," he continued. "Effective immediately, Tiffany Sinclair will serve as co-director of operations. She will have equal authority in all financial and strategic decisions. Her word is my word. Her protection is my priority. And anyone who questions her authority questions mine." He paused, letting the weight of the statement settle. "I'm also announcing that Miss Sinclair and I will be married next month. She will become not just my partner in business, but in life. She will be the first lady of this organization." The room erupted, some in surprise, some in approval, a few in barely concealed concern. Min-jae stood and bowed deeply. "Congratulations, Hyung, Miss Sinclair." One by one, the others followed suit, recognizing the shift in power and dynamics. When the meeting ended, Tiffany turned to Sung-hoon. "First Lady of the Mafia?" she said with raised eyebrows. "That's quite a title." "You've earned it," he said. "You've earned all of it. What if I mess up? What if I make mistakes? Then we'll fix them together." He pulled her close. "That's what partners do." She rested her head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her cheek. "I never imagined my life would look like this," she admitted. "Neither did I," he said. "I spent so long building walls that I forgot to build doors. You taught me how." "What now?" "Now?" He tilted her face up and kissed her softly. "Now we build something beautiful." And they did. 6 months after their wedding, Seoul magazine ran a feature article titled, "The Evolution of Power: How Sung-hoon Ryu Rebuilt Seoul's Most Feared Empire." The piece included a photograph of Sung-hoon and Tiffany at a charity gala, him in a sharp black suit, her in a stunning gold gown that hugged her curves magnificently. They stood hand in hand, equals in every sense, radiating a power that came not from fear but from partnership. The article noted the decline in violence, the increase in legitimate business ventures, the strategic alliances that had stabilized Seoul's underworld. It mentioned Tiffany's financial genius and her work establishing scholarships for women of color in business. But what the article couldn't capture was the quiet moment that same evening when Sung-hoon and Tiffany stood on their penthouse balcony, overlooking the city they'd reshaped together. "Any regrets?" she asked. "Only that I didn't let you in sooner," he said. "We got here eventually. We did." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You know, I kept that orchid. The one from your office? It's in our bedroom now. It bloomed last week." She smiled. "Growth requires care. Good thing you finally learned that." "I had a good teacher." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Seoul's lights twinkle like stars brought to earth. "Sung-hoon?" "Yes?" "I'm pregnant." He froze, his arms tightening around her. "What?" "I found out this morning. We're having a baby." She turned in his arms, searching his face. "Are you okay?" For a long moment, he couldn't speak. Emotions crashed through him. Joy, terror, wonder, fear, all the things he'd spent a lifetime avoiding. Then he thought about the scared 12-year-old boy who'd sworn never to be vulnerable again. And he thought about the man Tiffany had helped him become. "I'm better than okay," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm going to be a father." "Yes." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "You're going to be a father. And this child is going to grow up knowing that love isn't weakness, it's the strongest thing we have." Tears slid down Sung-hoon's cheeks, tears of gratitude, of healing, of hope. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you too." And in that moment, standing above the city they'd conquered together, Sung-hoon Ryu understood the final truth. His rule hadn't been destroyed by Tiffany Sinclair, it had been transformed. And in that transformation, he'd found the one thing he'd been searching for his entire life: freedom. Thank you for watching this story of forbidden love, healing, and redemption. If this journey moved you, click the next video on your screen to continue exploring stories that challenge us, change us, and remind us what it means to be human. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss these journeys. Until next time, stay brave, stay open, and remember, the rules we build to protect ourselves sometimes become the very chains we need to break.